Hey everyone, I just wanted to make a few comments about our third discussion with Unit 6. Once again, you all did a good job of interacting with one another on the discussion board, so I commend you again for that. Please keep up the good work of maintaining collegial tone with one another, even if you disagree on certain issues. I think that beginning with this unit that we just covered, and then moving into Unit 7, rounding out the course, we're going to find that there are some very controversial issues that we're talking about relative to New Mexico history, including things like poverty, racism, and activism, and there was one other one that I was thinking of that slipped my mind just now. But again, the point is, remember always to think historically, ground your ideas in the evidence from the readings and the videos, and interact with each other in that collegial way like we have been, and I think we can have some really great discussions to finish out the course strongly. As I have been doing, and not many people have taken me up on, I wanted to offer you an extra credit opportunity here, so for up to 30 points extra credit this time, if you respond to this video in the discussion thread where I post it to finish off this discussion, you can get the extra credit points. So the question that I want you to address is, what is historical thinking? So this one you're going to need to do some outside research. You need to ground your ideas in specific evidence from sources, but explain what do we mean when we talk about historical thinking or thinking historically, and what are the major skills that historians need to have in order to think historically but also conduct their research effectively. So if you were to sit down as a historian and do a research project where you were going to end up writing an article or a book that describes a certain historical era, again, what are the skills that you would need for that? So as usual, the standards are to cite evidence to support your ideas and respond to those questions, take that any direction that you want, that you can go in. So a few comments about this unit in particular. A lot of us were talking about Pancho Villa's raid and Maud Wright, and many of us posed a question about why he allowed Maud to live when he had killed her husband and their ranch hand, Frank Hayden, Ed Wright and Frank Hayden. And it's one of those kinds of questions which I think, it's really important as humans looking at the human experience. We want to understand what in the world could have been going through his mind that he would have allowed her to live but not them. And this horrible experience that she had as being captured by a group of Villistas. A note, Villa wasn't there when the Wrights were first captured. They were then taken to the main group. But it's a question we really won't ever have a definitive answer for, because we can't actually know what Pancho Villa himself was thinking. And if we look at his actions, it's kind of hard to tell what he was thinking at any given moment, especially in late 1915, 1916, 1917, when his movement had really bottomed out, and he became increasingly more desperate to try to regain his reputation and his standing in the Mexican Revolution. So one historian of the Mexican Revolution actually believes that Villa had just sort of lost it, had kind of gone crazy by the time of the raid. Others say he had some ideas. He was thinking, maybe we should raid the United States so that we can get U.S. intervention in Mexico. But again, all of his actions show that all of those things were probably true. He's probably kind of lost it. He's desperate. He's struggling. He's trying a bunch of different things. So going back to Maud Wright then, it seems like, based on the little glimpses of conversations between Villa and Maud that we get from her account, seems like he thought she was probably going to die along the way anyway, which is horrible way to think of it. But he kind of figured, I don't need to kill you. You'll probably die along the way anyway. Of course, she didn't, and she was reunited with her son Johnny. But again, I think these are very interesting, important questions to sort of think through, but also realize that there can't really be definitive answers historically based on the kinds of evidence that we have. A lot of the other topics that we covered, trying to just pull out some of the major themes from this unit, where we looked at finally achieving statehood, the Mexican Revolution, World War I, and loyalty being questioned, and then we looked at the Depression era. Sorry for the weird break there. The frames dropped for some reason. But anyway, the main themes that I'm thinking of with all of those historical events are issues of race, culture, national identity or nationalism. Sometimes we call that patriotism. When we studied the section on World War I, what I wrote about in the Mile, I drew on quite a lot from the ideas of Anne Mossman and her co-author, whose name is escaping me right now. I'll have to look it up again later, but their article was called Loyalty Question, looking at Nuevo Mexicanos during the World War I era. And something that they write about there is the notion of cultural citizenship. During World War I, nationally, there was a push for 100% Americanism. If you've studied the World War I era in other contexts, you've probably heard about this. We also learned about the CPI, the 4 Minutemen, and so on, that many of us commented on in Twitter. That was all part of creating a sort of sense of national unity, the sense that we're all part of the same team, the same group, unfortunately, by disparaging other groups, disparaging those who were currently our enemies in Europe, Germans and Italians. New Mexicans were once again suspect. Even though statehood had been achieved, they were suspect during the Mexican Revolution because outsiders thought that maybe New Mexicans had more loyalty to Mexico and interest in the Mexican Revolution than they did in things going on in the U.S. Most of them were really interested primarily in their kind of larger family networks, state and local politics, trying to make ends meet, those kinds of things, than they were about what was going on in Mexico. But because of this shared ethnicity, national heritage, these questions keep coming back. We don't always answer them very well, or we don't always deal with them very well as a nation, unfortunately. Building on this, there were also a lot of misconceptions about the level to which Nuevo Mexicanos and indigenous peoples, including Pueblos and Navajos and Apaches, were pre-industrial during the 20s and 30s. And so the reformers that we talked about, looking at people like Mabel Dodge Lujan and Mary Austin, John Collier even, they see New Mexico as this place that was untouched by time, as it were, and is untouched by the capitalist national economy. That wasn't true, though, as we've seen time and again. Nuevo Mexicanos and Native people were working as migrant laborers throughout the Southwest. They faced incredible hardships when the Depression hit. They were living in poverty, but the poverty was just compounded by the conditions of the Great Depression. And so some of these misconceptions caused the reformers and those who were part of the New Deal who might be able to lend some help, caused them to kind of look at New Mexico maybe the wrong light, seeing it as needing help with cultural fortification. And again, cultural preservation that came during the Depression and the New Deal, not a bad thing at all. It was a very important step. But in terms of setting up New Mexicans for getting out of poverty, getting the skills that they would need for the kinds of jobs that were coming in the future, the New Deal failed a lot in those regards. The Hispanic New Deal, the Indian New Deal, and even the larger New Deal nationally. And one thing, just as a corrective here at the end of this video, it seems that I was, at least from your comments, I kind of portrayed the New Deal in a very negative light. It is true that it sort of failed to end the Depression, but it was very effective in terms of bringing relief to people when they really needed it, creating a social safety net when none had existed before, recognizing that as citizens of this nation, we have a responsibility to make sure that none of us are living in abject poverty. And then when things happen with the national economy, we have a responsibility to work together to try to fix that for the good of all. And so these were some of the ideas and ideals that were coming out of the New Deal era. It wasn't until the massive deficit spending that came with World War II, however, that the Depression actually ended. So many analysis see that the Depression, the New Deal didn't go far enough, perhaps. in terms of providing new programs, new agencies, spending to try to get the economy going again. Last thought has to do with citizenship. So that's the theme that we see throughout these issues as well. And as we move forward, look at the civil rights era in the next unit and round out our course, I want us to keep in mind questions about citizenship. Who is a citizen? These things keep coming back time and again. But if we've answered these questions or tried to address them, then why is there a need for the civil rights era, the civil rights movements that we're going to look at and that we are looking at, as I've seen some of you on Twitter already? So what's the deal there? Why are these questions still left unanswered? Hopefully we can begin to address that larger question in the next unit.